and hell yeah, it is time to finally talk Spike deck, which I've previewed a little bit previously. I thought it would be cool to have my nails painted black in the spirit of Spike, but you know what? I'm too lazy for that. I'm not a nail polisher, as you can usually see at my videos. But Spike is reassuring me here in this comic book cover. His nails aren't painted there either, so we're all about the natural nail today and every day, as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, to finally get around to it, as I knock into my camera, I have mentioned previously that I made a tarot deck just for kicks. Just for shits and giggles. I was looking for something to kind of play around with creatively, something to get me excited, basically. I was starting to feel a little like apathetic and not inspired. I thought that I could like really supercharge my gears by trying to combine two things that I love so much, which would be the tarot and Buffy, and within Buffy, Spike. So I decided to explore Spike's character arc through the Fool's journey, and this is what I came up with. It really did help fire me up and get me really excited about a writing project that I'm now undertaking, not related to this, but I do have some writing related to this, because if you've seen my previous videos, I mentioned that I am going to make a book to go along with this. Not a very long one, just a guidebook of sorts, but the guidebook entries are poems to coincide with every card, because before he was a vampire, Spike was a lovely, if bloody awful poet, and I thought in homage to that I would let myself be a bloody awful poet, because I'm not a poet. I write prose, but I thought it'd be very fun to challenge myself with explaining my rationale for these cards, as well as conveying the traditional card meanings through the medium of poetry. I have finished the sonnets for the Major Arcana. I am kind of stalled when it comes to the court cards and the minors, just because I'm trying a different structure of poetry and it's not coming to me as easily. But I thought then I would start out by sharing just the majors along with their respective sonnets. But then I'm like, well, it's all going to be broken up in pieces, I guess. So I think it just makes sense to, at the outset, just share the whole deck right away. Just do a walkthrough. Oh, sorry about that. I would say a quick walkthrough, but because I am so excited about Buffy and Spike, I see myself getting long-winded on this, but I'm going to try to be as concise as I can possibly manage. Don't be optimistic, but there we go. But yeah, I thought I would just like walk through the whole deck and just explain some of my rationale behind it. And then I will come back with future videos for those who are interested. I totally get this is not everyone's bag. Not everyone's seen Buffy. Even if you have, you might not care what I have to say about it. So no problem. Just stop this video and go watch something else. I won't be offended. But for those of you who are interested in this and want to follow my journey with it, I will follow up with subsequent videos where I share the poems that go along with the cards. And I probably will divide that up by the majors and the minors and, well, the numbered minors and the court cards. But whatever, I'll leave that to the future. That is the bit that is just not yet done. So to finally get to this, well, first of all, the little mise en scène that I've set up here, I've got my little Spike pop vinyl. He was the very first Funko Pop I ever purchased, and I don't own many. I still don't own many, but of the handful, he led the way, and I love him so much. This is something I found on Redbubble. I forget who calls him Captain Peroxide. Was it Riley or Angel? I feel like it had to have been another, like, spiteful ex-boyfriend of Buffy's. But anyways, Captain Peroxide with the safety pins, like late 70s Billy Idol Spike wore. I've got my comic here. Who was this? Oh, this is IDW. So yes, I have collected quite a bit of the Buffy comics. And then I got this candle on Etsy, and I can't think of the store, but I'll have to link it below. And maybe it even says somewhere on here. My old eyes cannot read that, but what I can see is Sunnydale Sense. He may be Love's bitch, but at least he's man enough to admit it. And this is infused with, oh my God, hold on, I have to take this closer to my face to see. Saucy saffron tones intertwined with a base of warm musk. So there we go. Let's fire this baby up. Oh yeah, there we go. There we go. Okay, I could not stop knocking into my camera, so I've just adjusted it a bit here for a little bit more stability, but what I wanted to add to the visual effects here is a little audio compliments of Buffering, a Rewatch Adventure podcast. They started out as buffering The Vampire Slayer, specifically watching Buffy, and now they've gone all the way through all 7 seasons of that and are now onto the X-Files. And at their website, though, you can see that through their Buffy journey, they came up with all sorts of jingles for different characters because one of the co-hosts, Jenny Owen Youngs, is a singer-songwriter by profession. So every episode of their podcast also has an original song sung and recorded by Jenny at the end of the episode about the Buffy episode that they covered. So, I mean, if you love Buffy and are fancying a rewatch anytime soon, I highly, highly recommend rewatching along with this podcast if you're interested, because you really get a lot of bang for your buck with them. But anyway, here is a Spike jingle that has been my ringtone on my phone for years now. I have just accessed it now at Bandcamp, and I want to play it to set the scene. Yeah. Seriously, how awesome was that? I just love it so much. But okay, let's get to the deck itself. And yeah, just kind of, oh, baby boy, I'm sorry. Yeah, Spike's taking some hard knocks, so I know he's all right, but still, he's been through enough. Starting with the Fool, my idea here, and obviously with this whole deck, I'm not an artist. You know, I don't draw, paint, do digital art, collage, what have you. It's not my wheelhouse. And so I was challenged from the outset as to how I would get the ideas in my head into something, you know, physical, with the visual on it, and I resorted to stock photo, which I then manipulated. I used Canva. Anyways, you're not going to actually see Spike or Buffy or any Buffy characters in this deck. It is all through objects that, to me, symbolize certain scenes, certain turning points in the show, and that I felt reflected the respective tarot card. And you might disagree if you know the show super well. And I mean, I had multiple ideas for certain things too. And ultimately I had to choose. So obviously there's no right way to do this. And there is a Buffy deck that officially exists out there. And that created a lot of like debate among Buffy fans about whether we were happy or not with some of the selections they made. And people had their own ideas. And so this is not going to be any exception here. What is definitely different with this though versus the Buffy deck is just the fact that the focus is on Spike. And so other characters will be involved in this, but it really is following his character arc, his fool's journey through the deck. And I felt that that began for him as the fool when he was William the Bloody Awful Poet. William Pratt in Victorian London before he is turned into a vampire. And I thought of the poem that he had been writing for Cecily on the night that Drusilla turned him into a vampire. And he was looking for a word that meant like gleaming, glowing, and he needed it to rhyme. And he was struggling with that. And he ultimately settles on the word effulgent. Well, some asshole at the party, snatches the poem away and reads it out loud to everyone, which is like William's biggest freaking nightmare. And they're laughing at him over the poem and his choice of rhyme with the word effulgent. And so, he grabs it and he ends up storming out of that party upset. And it's so sad. And so he's like, crumpling it and tearing it up as he's storming out. And then ultimately he encounters Drusilla, who introduces him to a whole new life. It is a whole new journey for him to set out upon. And it's a huge risk. He seems to realize at first, being really weirded out by her, but then he's kind of like entranced by her, it seems. And it all happens rather quickly, but he seems to know what he is choosing in stepping off of this precipice with Drusilla and allowing her. Well, I don't know how much choice she would have given him if he didn't accept it. She probably still would have bitten him, but maybe just killed him. But he seems to go into it quite willingly, and then she turns him. And so this is just to depict his poem fallen to the street and then the blood dripping from his fang wounds as he makes that choice, takes that risk to step off the cliff with Drew. So then, hearkening my little red bubble purchase here, for the magician, I have chosen that same image of just the safety pins that Spike used to decorate his shirt, basically, when he was in his Billy Idol phase, or excuse me, starting the trend that Billy Idol would then copy, according to him. But from that scene that we see from late 70s, he's fighting Nikki Wood, the Slayer at the time, on the New York subway. And I chose that version of Spike, that period of his life from early days, as the magician, because I always like the magician as being very resourceful and, making do with what you have at your disposal and having an idea, having an aim and manifesting it, making it happen for yourself. And so Spike did something that like really no other vampires seem to aspire to by going after the Slayers. And he had already killed one long before Nikki Wood. He back in the Boxer Rebellion, and when he was like freshly minting himself as Spike and taking on a new accent and a new persona entirely. And so, he set his focus on that. And so he does end up killing 2 Slayers that way. And so I thought, okay, there's a guy who had a goal and actually made it happen. And I just thought, like, in that scene with Nikki, he's being very resourceful in how they're fighting. There's just that kick-ass moment. I personally love it so much in the Fool for Love episode where he like knocks out the pole that's on the subway car and, you know, starts twirling it. And that could be used as another weapon if he needs it. He seemed to do all right without it though. But you know, that's very clever. That's making use of what he had available to him in this like confined environment and having to think very quickly on his feet. And then even this as decoration. I mean, I remember this trend in the 80s. I did it with my jean jacket. If you didn't have, you know, a jacket that had like studs or rhinestones forming a pattern, you could make it yourself with safety pins, which is in itself is a very resourceful thing to do. So anyways, resourceful is not the only word that I have for the magician, but I just thought I saw that as an aspect of it and this visually reflecting that, but then also just that idea of Spike, like the younger, as a younger vampire and being, very determined to go after the slayers and kill them and actually achieving it. So he is the magician in that respect. The High Priestess for me couldn't be anyone else but Drusilla when it comes to a Spike-driven narrative here. So this is one of her dollies, and I have given her a gag. And as you might notice, this is a predominantly black and white deck, other than the red, of course, on the backs of the cards. And then every now and then, though, certain cards, if there seemed to be good opportunity, I gave a splash of red where I saw fit. So in this case, it's the gag on this dolly here, which could be Miss Edith. It could be another dolly that spoke out of turn. And yeah, Drusilla just fitting as the High Priestess, especially in terms of Spike's life, because she was a very intuitive being. I mean, she had her psychic abilities and she was able to intuit what was going to happen in the near future or even more distant future. And so she was always feeling her way through or seeing the signs for things to come, and Spike took her very seriously with that. And and I think that sort of presence in his life probably was a great influence for him as well. He always did this thing with her where he'd like lay his palm, like press it to her breastbone, which I always thought was so interesting. There was never any like overt explanation for it, because it's not like he would feel a heartbeat, right, if he did that. But there was something where he just did that, and it's just like, it's such like an intimate gesture, and just, I don't know, it says so much, and I don't even know like how to articulate it, but it just really shows this like, if they had souls, they're soulless vampires, but as soulful as two vampires could be, this like soulful connection between them and just something really from the heart. Granted, they're dead, dried up hearts, but do you get where I'm going here? Just very much something like, you know, he loved her from eyeballs to entrails. And there was just something about like, just a very like visceral feeling and like gut feeling that you could just sense with those two when they were together and like acting on that kind of instinct. And so that intuitive realm just very much corresponds with the High Priestess, of course, and Drusilla definitely like channeling that sort of energy. Then, you know, before Drusilla, and then a little bit after, I guess, at least after she turned Spike, there was his mother, who I have made the Empress. So there is a flashback where we see his mother with her needle and thread. She seems to be embroidering something, and William is sitting with her, and she sings this folk song that those of you that watch Buffy in the last season, we see it becomes a trigger for Spike when he hears this song. It causes him to vamp out and kill people, even though Spike consciously is not doing that anymore. But it's a trigger that kind of overrides the chip in his head that first of all keeps him from killing people without pain, but then by that point with his soul, spoiler alerts, a galore in this video. So I hope that you wouldn't have been watching and not expecting spoilers. But when he has a soul, you know, he's also choosing not to kill people. And so anyways, that was a trigger for him because his mother was such a pivotal like figure in his life. She was everything to him and he everything to her, until they died, basically. She is stitched here. I've shown the first words of that folk song. Because he ended up having a really traumatic experience with her after he did turn into a vampire and she was very ill, and he thought he could save her by turning her, and then she could live forever and they could have this wonderful life together. And you could tell Drusilla wasn't thrilled with the idea of having, an eternity with her boyfriend's mom. But then his mom, when the demon is inside of her instead of her own soul, she's quite vicious. She says some quite horrible, quite disturbing things to her son. And Spike is understandably traumatized, even as a vampire. That was always the thing that's so fascinating with Spike and why someone like me would undertake a project like this just about him. Because he just had that complexity. I mean, with a lot of vampires, it's like they're turned, they lose their soul, boom, that's it. They've lost their humanity. But Spike held on to so much of his humanity that he still loved his mother as a vampire and wanted to spend the rest of his life with her. And just with Drusilla in the mix. But anyway, because, his mom was just saying such horrible things, he ended up staking her, but that naturally is going to have a lasting impact, and it's something that he had to resolve further down the road. But anyways, as the Empress, she is that overarching maternal energy for him. So for a father figure, we don't actually get any story, I don't think, on William's actual dad. So I've chosen the Claddagh ring to represent Angelus here. And the Claddagh ring was something Angel wore. That was a thing with him and Buffy. But it was an easy, very, very easy visual to grab just to represent Angelus. I just thought it would be the clearest depiction, actually the easiest depiction too, if I am honest. So this is just meant to be Angelus, who's that paternal figure who, he didn't sire Spike, but he sired Spike's sire. So he's like his grandsire. And he is that like male kind of father figure for him, because as a new vampire, that's who he's going to look to for guidance. And in Angel, the spinoff show to Buffy, where there are flashbacks, I believe this one was on Angel, not on Buffy, the series, but where we see, like a younger William turned Spike learning some of the ropes from Angelus and being challenged by him and looking up to him as a mentor. And, that persists until Angelus is kind of a dick and does things intentionally to hurt Spike. And so their relationship gets complicated from that point onward. And then ultimately there's a point where they part ways and really despise each other. And then Buffy, of course, becomes another bone of contention between them. But anyways, in early life, though, early vampire life, Angelus definitely present as that like paternal figure, bringing in the masculine energy, kind of teaching Spike, and also is very traditional, relatively speaking. I mean, Angelus was quite sadistic, don't get me wrong, but he was more, he approached his kill with a bit more finesse, and he felt that there was an art to it. And so as a result, he would torture his victims, hideously. That was his art. And he was not thrilled with the way that a young Spike would just be more like balls out looking for a fight and very impetuous. And Angelus was always afraid that like Spike was going to get them caught and killed because he was just so reckless in his behavior. And so he just felt that there was a certain like structure to live within, something that was proper. And so that's very like emperor like energy for me. The Hierophant is the scene where, okay, so it's the episode School Hard in season 2 of Buffy when Spike and Drusilla first drive into town and chance upon the Anointed One, who is that little boy that the master had as his little protege and is now kind of running things. And so he's looking for someone, trying to recruit someone to slay the Slayer. And so having killed 2 Slayers, of course, Spike steps up to the challenge. And he's supposed to do it on like a certain holiday. I don't know if it's like just a vampire holiday, like, I don't know. It's very like prescribed when this is supposed to happen, and just sort of like the ritual and routine that the master had observed. Spike's not having it. He just does his way, things his way. It's like with Angelus, you know, he's not going to observe any kind of decorum. He's just, you know, going with his gut and living in the moment and living for the moment. And so this is the scene then where he's kind of had it with the Anointed One that he called the Annoying One, throws him in this cage and raises the cage into where the sunlight is beaming in from a window, and it dusts him. And as he does this, Spike says something to the effect of, it's time for, you know, more fun, less ritual. And so the Hierophant, to me, representing that kind of ritual, that convention that we can have within religion or government, other societal structures. And that was something represented by the Anointed One. And Spike, in killing him, he's shaking things up in Sunnydale and he's bucking that convention. So that's how I felt that was appropriate for Hierophant. The Lovers. All right, this is where we get a little Buffy in, as represented by her steak, and then Spike is represented by his cigarette. And the police lights here, one of which I brought out the red on that one, and this one was blue until I made it black and white. But this is to represent the scene where Spike and Buffy form an alliance at the end of season 2. So the police are looking for Buffy and drive up onto her lawn, and just when she's thinking she's going to have this confrontation and get out of another situation, Spike rolls up and knocks the policeman out and approaches Buffy with his proposition that they team up with each other because he doesn't want the world to end either. And so he wants her help to thwart Angelus's plan, which Drew is going along with also. So, you know, it's a moment where they both have a choice to make. I mean, Spike's made his choice in actually showing up at Buffy's house and proposing this, and she now needs to look in the face of one of her mortal enemies and decide, is she going to take that path? Is she going to join forces with him? Can she trust him long enough to, in fact, save the world without getting harmed herself or her friends harmed in the process? So that's a huge choice to have to make. And they do ultimately form an actual alliance, though, and it works. You know, they part ways after that. But I just thought this crisscross of these symbols could represent that idea of kind of like the crossroads and the path to take. You can go this way, you can go that way. Show that element of choice in the Lover's card, and then just also, you know, an intertwining, a joining together, which also can be represented by this card. It's a complicated one, just like Buffy and Spike's relationship was a complicated one throughout the seasons, and therefore so fascinating to me. And this is where it really all begins, in this moment in front of this police car. So for the Chariot, it's kind of an obvious choice, I guess, but I picked Spike's card, the very one that he runs into the Sunnydale welcome sign twice with, and has like craft paper and paint covering the windows so that he can drive in the daylight without getting burnt by the sun. And yeah, those are his wheels. And so that's what propels him forward. And pretty straightforward there. Now this one, I am already anticipating people maybe disagreeing on. I chose Spike's chip from season 4 as strength. Not because I think the chip is the source of his strength, but it is the catalyst for him having to find his strength. I mean, it is literally the thing. When we think of like a traditional RWS strength card and we see the woman with the lion and kind of taming it, I mean, the chip is the thing in Spike's brain. So Elon Musk, you weren't the first to do it. I mean, maybe with humans, but I mean, the initiative was doing chips in demons ages ago. So catch up, dude. What was I saying? So the chip, though, was the thing that tamed the demon inside him. But it didn't stop him from actually harming a person. He could still do it. It just hurt like hell. So it is like technically the thing that like curbs that primal desire that he has. But it is also the thing that like teaches him, again, he could still go after a human and he could still like tough out the pain perhaps and still hurt them. But to avoid this, he does find that like restraint in himself and discipline. And he pivots with what he can eat, basically. I mean, the blood that he can drink, just realizing he can't get it in the way that he used to do it. It's got to come through, I guess, a bit more less violent and honest means. And so I actually give him some credit in having to teach himself that kind of restraint too, because he could still have that impulse to go after someone. But of course, this is classical conditioning by virtue of the chip that is very much at play there. But regardless, he's having to adjust his lifestyle and his approach to finding his sustenance. And I just feel that he ultimately plays an active part in kind of restraining the beast within as well. So that's my logic for that. And does it also make for a really easy image to just pull off a stock photo site and slap onto a card? Yeah. So the lazy deck creator here, folks. That's how I roll. So the Hermit, kind of following the chronology of this, where now Spike is limited because of the chip in his head. He's become more dependent on the Scoobies and kind of needing to rely on them for opportunities at times for, it seems like they pay him money sometimes, or maybe they give him blood or whatever if he helps out with their cause. And he figures out his own way too, his own means of like surviving. But he's kind of got that relationship going on with them and feels, because of that, safe enough. Buffy's choosing not to slay him because he can be of help. And so he's able to settle down basically inside his crypt. And so this is meant to be his chair in front of the television set. And I put a P because the intro to the show Passions, even though I've never actually watched it, I did find the intro to it on YouTube, and it begins with like this script P, and then the whole word eventually spells out across the screen, Passions. And you then get a montage of characters and so forth. So the P is meant to represent passions. Spike is sitting in his crypt watching that. But and so instead of his lantern, I guess here's the illumination for this Hermit card. But this is like Spike's isolation on his own in his mausoleum. as he's feeling out this new stage of life. He's not quite a vampire, but he is certainly not human yet. He is still soulless. And so this is like the place where he can retreat to and just does what he does in there. And he is a character of great perspective. He offers a lot of insight, tends to see things that others don't see. And I feel like this alone time in his crypt is probably, a good opportunity for him to kind of like reflect on these things too, and kind of replay the observations that he makes and kind of draw meaning from that and intuit a bit. And so anyways, yeah, even a vampire needs a little quiet time like that. So then going into the Wheel of Fortune, loosely creating a little like wheel here, I've got, it's his black t-shirt when he's on the upswing here, but then the tropical shirt that he finds in Xander's parents' basement when he's on the downswing. And then when he's just at the bottom, it's like, this is probably a burlap sack, but this is meant to be his blanket that he will run around town in the sunlight to avoid getting burnt. My thought here, when he does first have the chip and he cannot kill humans, he cannot feed off of them, so he is starving. So in the Pangs episode of Buffy, he shows up like a pauper at Giles's door in his blanket, and he's really hit a rock bottom here. He looks like shit, and he's starving, and he is desperate enough to go to the Scoobies for help. And they do take him in, even though they, tie him up to a chair. Of course, they're not going to automatically trust him, but they do take him in there. And so, and then he eventually is like living in Xander's basement for a time too, but then he ends up, does he shrink his clothes in the washer dryer down there? And so Xander comes home to find him in this like beachy shirt and shorts, which of course just make him look ridiculous. Not that the clothes themselves are ridiculous, but on Spike it is. His pale little legs in those shorts, oh my God, so not his vibe. But they catch him, and Willow's there too, when he's wearing this outfit and about to stake himself because he is so down on his luck and just he's so like disgusted with this life that he has to live. He can't fight, he can't feed, he can't be the vampire that he was, and he just feels useless, and so he just doesn't want to live anymore. But then like towards the end of that episode, he ends up going with them to the Hellmouth and is able to, I think it was the Hellmouth, there's some sort of portal at the high school where he finds out there that he can fight demons and not get hurt with this chip in his head. And so then he's like psyched. So the very end of that episode, I forget what it's called, but he's back in his black t-shirt and black jeans, and he's just like, yeah, come on, let's go fight something. And yeah, he's really like randy for the fight. So there he is on the upswing of that. And therein lies my logic for these images that I've chosen. So yeah, he's got his fight back, and that is enough of a morale boost to like, keep him going a bit longer. So now I've got another ring here to represent justice, because yes, to have a single object like this, it's so easy. But this is Spike and Buffy's engagement ring, a ring that Spike evidently was already wearing when Willow's spell goes awry in the episode Something Blue, and makes Spike and Buffy believe that they're getting married. So then Buffy's wearing it in that episode as her engagement ring after Spike proposes, and then they proceed to wedding plan. And why I chose this for justice, Willow doing this spell, she is in a really tough place, a really sad place. She and Oz have split up, and she's really grieving for this relationship, and he leaves town, and that really just sends her further spiraling downward. And she's depressed, and it's kind of like messing with Buffy's vibe with her new love with Riley. And, so Willow is kind of becoming this like little rain cloud in her friends' lives. So, I mean, they're kind of there for her, but they're kind of not also. They're kind of like just trying to, say what they need to say to pacify her in the moment, but then kind of brushing her aside so they can go have, their own fun. And so it's just like making her bitter against everyone. So she casts this spell with the intention of making her will happen. And that is what ends up happening. But what she doesn't realize is that like every like kind of comment she makes, just like in jest or just out of this resentment she's feeling towards her friends, ends up being her will, and it makes it happen to them. And so, she just has that like throwaway line, like, 'cause Buffy just seems more preoccupied with, after she's preoccupied with Riley, she's preoccupied with finding Spike. And then she's like, well, why doesn't she just marry him? And so then that's where this situation comes about. So it's a real, like, what goes around comes around kind of situation. I do tend to look at a facet of the Justice card being that karmic principle. And so her friends are kind of getting a comeuppance by virtue of how the spell affects them, by not like really being there for her and showing up through her grief. And, maybe there's only so much they can do too. So it's not like to throw the blame on them. It's just that, Willow feels what she feels. And I know now I'm making it like more about Willow, but I mean, this brings it into how that like directly affected Spike. And so even though you could probably blame Buffy more for why this thing is coming around to try to like balance the scales here, he gets pulled into the mix on it. So chose that for Justice. Also kind of works out like chronologically with how I'm following the plot events of the series. So that was season 4, and then this is getting into season 5, The Hanged Man. This is the scene where Glory has now entered the picture in season 5. She's looking for the key, and she tells her minions that it's something dear to the Slayer. It's something that she's protecting, and so they see Spike with the Buffy bot, and thinking that the Buffy bot is Buffy, and the way that she is defending him and protecting him when they're attacked. They see that and they feel like, oh, the Slayer is treating him as if he's precious. So this must be the key. And so then Glory has him back at her mansion and strung up and torturing him. She knows right away that as a vampire, he's not pure enough to be the key, but she feels he's close enough to the Scoobies that she could at least get some information from him. So here's a moment where we've literally got, Spike tied up. He's not hanging upside down, but his hands are tied above his head like this. And he's kind of like hanging in that respect. And he's sacrificing here. He is taking the torture and not giving up anything in order to protect Buffy, because he doesn't want anything. He knows if anything happened to Dawn, he couldn't handle what that would do to Buffy. And this is a real turning point for him, where all these other things that he might have been doing, getting into alliance with Scoobies, it was very like selfishly motivated. But this is a turning point, this episode, where we see his, oh God, what is the term for it? It's not moral judgment, but there's kind of like there's like levels, I guess, of one's morality and what kind of motivates us to do the right thing or to not do the wrong thing. And so if you're operating at a lower level of this, basically, I can't think of what it's called, but the idea is that like, oh, you don't do a bad thing just because you don't want to get punished for it, or you do a good thing because you'll get rewarded for it. So it's like there's something very like selfishly in it for you, and that's the only reason why you do the right thing or you don't do the wrong thing. But then if you move up and you're operating at a higher level, you're doing the right thing just because you know it's the right thing to do. So Spike hasn't like fully like evolved up the scale here yet, because I mean he hears about Buffy. He wants to be with her. So it is like selfish for him in that he, because he cares about her, and if he wants any chance with her, you know, like he's going to be looking out for her best interest there too. But I think that there is definitely a component here where he just knows it's the right thing to do. So he's willing to hang there and take the blows and the cuts and everything in order to sacrifice, which is an element of the Hanged Man. But then also just kind of gaining that new perspective. I think it really takes his crush on Buffy, his feelings towards her, to the next level. Because up to this point, he has been interacting, shall we say, with the Buffy bot. So it's more like baser carnal needs there. But we're starting to see like some real authentic feeling coming through this as there's a shift in perspective, which I also feel the Hanged Man embodies. So speaking of the bot, I chose her for death. And maybe she didn't end up in this much disrepair after she malfunctions in that fight against like Glory's minions at the mansion. But you know, this moment where Buffy comes to Spike's crypt dressed as the Buffy bot, because she heard that he just looked thrashed. And so Xander and Giles, I think, just brought him back home to his crypt. And she realizes like what he sacrificed for her. And so she goes, but no one can know if they can trust Spike, right? So she goes dressed as the Buffy bot and imitating the Buffy bot so that Spike will like talk to it, telling the truth, not realizing it's the real Buffy. That's the hopeful aim for it anyway, because I think she just wants to get down to like finding out, did he tell Glory anything? And so when she goes and she realizes that he didn't, and then she realizes why, I put this in to represent the kiss that she gives him as sort of his reward and a sign of her earnest gratitude, because as she told him, like, you know, the bot is lost. He's not getting that back. That wasn't real. But what he did for Dawn and for her, that was real. So this is like the end of this kind of disgusting, baser Buffy bot business for Spike, and the beginning of something real between him and Buffy, even if it's, you know, just platonic. Again, there's just that real turning point in his characterization there, and he's operating at these higher levels of morality, basically, and doing this without a soul. Oh! So yes, so death, obviously with endings and beginnings, it was real pivotal for him. So then Temperance, trying to evoke the image, you know, where you see the angel tipping one vessel of water or of some fluid into another. We get that kind of like alchemical mix going on. I have the Kiss the Librarian mug pouring blood into a bowl of Weetabix. And I don't know, the blood and the Weetabix must make for a beautiful alchemy for Spike, because he does say to Giles at one point that, you know, he doesn't need to eat food, but he likes the texture that it gives the blood. And hey, this is the way that he's been able to like adjust to his life, forced on him by that chip. You know, as I was saying with the strength card, this has forced his hand, but he has like willingly then had to adapt. So the idea here is that, okay, this is Giles's mug. So at this time now where Spike is with the Scoobies, he's living with Giles, initially tied or chained up as they're trying to get information from him on the initiative. But then eventually, as he does more and more build their trust, because he is more and more making good decisions for the right reasons, you know, he gets to be a little free range at Giles's house. And that's when I assume he takes to eating his blood with the Weetabix, and it makes Giles mad because then he's always running out of cereal. But I just thought this is all part of Spike tempering those primal impulses in him that he has as a vampire. And he's got this, just a bloodlust, but he can't act on it without incurring that huge pain. And so now he's just found the way that he can live. If it's drinking pig's blood, and doing so in a more civilized way out of a mug instead of a neck, and mixing it with cereal and kind of finding the pleasure in it that he can find. This is what he's got to do now. And this is how he's able to find this moderation in his life that keeps him and the human Scoobies, in sort of a state of harmony with each other. And so that's how he finds his moderation, and that's Temperance to me. Now we get to the devil. The first thing I thought of for this, for thinking about temptations, addictions, restrictions, I just saw that most with Spike and Buffy season 6 when they actually start sleeping with each other. And they're both, Spike has feelings for Buffy, but Buffy's definitely just using Spike. So it's not a good look for either one of them. And this is meant to represent Spike's rug underneath his crypt that after one bout of lovemaking, they're laying underneath it. So I don't know if that's where they were doing it or if they were on top and then they ended up under. I don't know what the logistics of that sex session was, but in that scene where they're laying under the rug, he also pulls up a pair of handcuffs that I presume they've probably used in some of their play. And he's like, "Do you trust me?" And she tells him never. So it's it just shows how unhealthy this relationship is for them. They're doing this and there's not the trust there. They're just using, and it's not, there's nothing wrong with a relationship that's just sex, but it's just that it's not good for either of them emotionally. It's not the healthiest way for Buffy to be managing her depression after coming back to life. And Spike is, I was going to say he's taking advantage of it, but he's so crazy about her. It's he'd almost be crazy to not take her up on it if she shows up and she's raring to go. It's I don't blame him for being well, yeah, I'll have sex with you. But, again, if he had a soul and was operating at a higher level of moral judgment, he probably would be able to perceive that this wasn't good for her. And at least there is that moment when she does approach him just to say, this is killing me. And she apologizes to him and she calls him by his real name, William, which is so heartbreaking. And that's of all the sexy stuff we see between them, that was the most intimate Spike Buffy moment for me when she calls him William. But that's happening after this devil moment, this devil stage of their lives. But he does honor that. He does, he temporarily honors that. You can see it on his face. He is devastated. He is heartbroken, but you can see it's also kind of killing him that it's killing her. And to maybe he should have known that, being so perceptive as he is, but his own feelings and wants were getting in the way of that. But to have her say it herself, it's you can tell that in the mix of his own heartbreak, he's also I feel he's feeling pain that that's how she feels about it. So it's all around, she's kind of sad for both of them, but she does the right thing though in breaking things off, and he does give her space for a time until so I didn't want to have to show a bathtub or bathroom in this card, but if you know the episode, I'm talking about seeing red. Before this awful scene where Spike, he's too heartbroken without Buffy, and he comes to her and is just so desperately wants to be back with her, and tries to force her into that. I'll just leave it at that. Prior to that, she's not able to fight him off as well as she otherwise would because she's been injured, because before coming home, she was patrolling and fighting a vampire, and she got thrown into a headstone and it breaks against her back. So she comes home aching from this, and she's drawing herself a bath as part of her recovery. So I chose that then as the tower, just to represent that episode in general. And fortunately, she has enough fight in her to be able to fend him off. But that is a massive tower moment for the both of them. Now, Spike has pushed things into something where, he could have continued on maybe having a reasonable platonic relationship with her, but if he ever had any prayer of earning her trust, obviously he's not going to do so that way. And so this whole thing that they had and these hopes that he had just come crumbling down, and he really has this realization, like, things can't continue the way that they are. It's the situation's been forced now. He can't be a man, but he can't be a vampire properly either. And so that's the pivotal turning point then, where he realizes he needs to do something. They can't keep going the way that they've done. And even if there was any chance of that, he has absolutely blown it with his hideous aggression here. And so that's where he makes the choice then to try to become someone worthy of Buffy and who she could hopefully one day trust. And so for the star, I have chosen Spike's soul. So this is that glow when that demon who's like officiating the trials that Spike has to undergo lays his hand on his chest and gives him his soul. And I don't know how well it's showing up, but very faintly. And I deliberately like faded it out as if it's like seeping into this black denim, but there's like streaks, spatters of blood behind this glowing, just to represent the bloody trials that he was having to go through to earn that. So then the moon here is the scene in the chapel where Buffy learns that Spike has gotten his soul. The visual here being the cross that Spike rests against at the end of that scene when he asks Buffy if they can rest now. And of course, being a vampire laying on a cross, it causes his skin to burn against it. And so that's the smoke of a burning Spike rising up there. But this whole scene is like very dark and moonlit in this chapel, which literally evokes the moon for me. But it's just also this sense of like Spike is not in his right mind since getting his soul back. He is not making a lot of sense. He can kind of pull it together temporarily at some points, but at this point, he is just like rambling on and on, kind of incoherently for Buffy. She does not know what he's talking about until she does, and really can't believe it. And so he's just kind of like speaking very cryptically, and so I just saw that like that moonlight just sort of that sense of like where you can just get lost and afraid in the dark. And that's very much a place where Spike is at this point. You know, he didn't know what was going to happen when he got his soul back. And he says, I think in that scene, like, Angel should have told me. And that's one of Buffy's clues, what he's talking about here. Because it is bringing back the memory of every horrible thing he's done. And now with his soul, he has a real conscience about that. And it's like just destroying him from the inside. And he's just feeling terrorized by it. So, you know, just going with like just that fear and uncertainty that you can get with the moon, and then just the facade that can be present with that too, because Spike does at times try to pull it together. And earlier that night, you know, he had his hair all slicked back, and he was all cleaned up and wearing new clothes, different look than the disheveled mess that he was in the Sunnydale High School basement, and where he was, you know, surviving on rats and such. He's trying to give that appearance of being okay, but, you know, he's really not okay. So that just kind of that idea of like deceptiveness there too. But then just trying to find that way, you know, he's got his soul, the star that can be that guiding light, but it's very scary for him at first. And he's got to try to like really look to that light, believe that that light is there to kind of find his way again to who he really is, to his true self. And so this is just such a like mysterious and murky and scary and confusing moment here. And so I chose that for the moon. But then to come in and shed light and a sense of, if not joy, maybe the closest thing that he can find at this point. This is the moment where, this not your obvious visual for the sun. I know. Give me a second. So this is now following where in season 7, Spike, because he has that trigger in his head and can't even trust himself to not harm someone, because they don't really have a handle yet on how it's happening, but Buffy believes him. And so he's able to stay at her house, but he is chained in the basement just for everyone's protection, because and he wants it that way too, because he just doesn't know what might happen. And but there's this beautiful moment where like Buffy is standing before him and tells him that she believes in him. Like, she has seen the man that he has fought to become, and he's become him. And even if he's not believing in himself yet, you know, with all that like fear and doubt from this phase, like, she believes in him. And that's right before the moment then a bunch of bringers come in as sent by the first, and they abduct Spike and take him down into this underground lair where he gets bound up again and tortured by the uber vamp. Because the first, of course, is incorporeal and can't physically harm him, but the Verse does play mind games in the meantime by taking on the form of Drusilla and of Buffy, and trying to recruit Spike and bring him onto its side. And anyways, this is the moment where like the real Buffy, even though he doubts it at first and he thinks it's just the first, again, coming with a knife to hurt him. It's Buffy in the flesh coming with that knife to cut his hands free and liberate him from this. And what got him through that whole thing was just saying and reminding himself, she believes in me, she believes in me, she's going to come for me. So just like that light and that hope that she brings to his life, and her belief in him is what helps him believe in himself too. And so yes, I just saw that as a shining moment for Spike. Now, Judgment. Maybe the chronology of the episodes is a bit out of order here, but if that is the case, I still couldn't resist using this visual for Judgment. At first I was like going to show bodies rising out of graves like we see in the traditional RWS Judgment card, but this is hinting at it well enough. This is Spike digging graves in the basement of whoever's house it is. I don't know. I think he killed the owner of the house too. But when that trigger is in effect and Spike is able to like override the pain of the chip, and he's not in control of himself, and he kills people and turns them and buries them before they then rise again as vampires. That idea of the graves and the people rising, like very literally made me think of the Judgment card. But then thematically how it fits in is this is another huge, huge turning point for Spike, relating back to that folk song that his mother would sing to him, which ends up being the thing triggering him. He has to overcome his past in order to overcome this trigger and then level up in his life, which is how I see Judgment, where you're looking back on the things you've done and atoning for that and choosing a higher path, a better path. And when Robin Wood traps Spike in that, I don't know, is it his garage? Some kind of room with crosses hanging everywhere. And then Robin plays the little ditty that triggers Spike so he can fight the vampire that killed his mother. That whole confrontation leads Spike reflecting on the horrible thing that had happened with his mother, and that trauma that he had, and then and having to live with himself too for like what he's done. He's being put in this situation because he killed Robin's mother, who was the Slayer at the time, and now he's killed more people, and now he has his soul, and he knows he's killed people since then. And he's got to live with that. And so he has had to really look at his past, stare it down very hard, and just try to come to some kind of peace with it. Like, he knows it's not okay, but he knows he also can't keep judging himself by that forever. Like, if he is going to be a better person, he can't continue to be held back by that. Like, if he's going to make any amends, then he needs to just live his life better and not beat himself up for it at every turn. He'll always have to live with that guilt and that regret, but you know, it's only moving forward from this point. He can't go back and change that past. And he understands different factors that were at play that, you know, at least with the situation with his mom, he comes to more understanding and finds a bit more peace with that. So anyways, I just saw that as that huge, huge, huge turning point, that leveling up for Justice that leads him then to this culmination in the world where he gets to look like Elizabeth Taylor wearing the amulet that Angel brings to Sunnydale, delivered to him at Wolfram and Hart. And he gives it to Buffy, who gives it to Spike because she believes in him and believes that he is a proper champion who can now wear this in this like ultimate fight at the Hellmouth. And so he does. And this is not the literal amulet. Just like everything from here, I didn't take any images directly from the show. I just took stock images and just kind of played with things until it could kind of just at least represent well enough. And so this does not literally look like the amulet, but it's close enough. Because actually, I think I just found a picture of a diamond, and then I don't know if this was like a bracelet or something. I don't know. I found this chain and I put it around there as like setting for this diamond, and then just found this other necklace that I put behind it. And then I added a glow for when the sun shines in and then just activates this thing, and Spike makes the ultimate sacrifice, bringing this whole journey full circle, becoming the vampire who didn't have a soul to becoming the vampire with the soul who finds redemption and sacrifices himself to save the world. And no thanks to the Angel series. That doesn't get to be his ultimate conclusion. But as far as Buffy goes, he gets to die a hero. And that is where my Major Arcana ends then, too. And this video is already getting very long, I'm realizing. So I think I'm going to call it. I would have loved to have just done this in one video, but I am just way too damn wordy. So I'm going to leave the majors to their own video. I will come back with the minors. And yeah, I'll just approach it that way. But as you can already see here is a sneak peek. My Wands suit is cigarettes, because Spike likes to smoke cigarettes. And I am going to yet again make the disclaimer that I've made before anyone gets at all offended. First of all, cigarettes, too long for my titles here, so I wanted to abbreviate it. But cigs, I did not feel would be authentic to Spike's voice because he's British, and you know, in the US we might say cigs as slang, but in the UK it's more commonly fags. So this is not a derogatory term as being used here. This is the slang term, the British slang term for cigarettes. So that is what appears on the cards of this suit. So I will pick up in my next video and in better lighting when it's daylight again with the Wands suit. And meanwhile, I thank you so much for joining me here. I was having a really annoying day, and I thought just doing this right now would be the thing to cheer me up, and it has, just getting to talk about Spike. So thanks for listening to my rambles. I don't know what effect I've had on your day, but this has really been a pick-me-up for me, but it has gotten longer than I intended it to, so I will just have to come back at another time. So thanks for your patience with that, and in the meantime, I hope you are doing well, and I would love to hear your reactions to what I've chosen for the Major Arcana of my Fool for Tarot deck, as I've called it, because Spike is the Fool for Love. Yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on that, if you agree or disagree, and any other insights that you would like to share. And until next time, my darlings. Spike, I love you, Spike.